Bore good morning, pawb. Welcome to a discussion between myself and a couple of writers. I'm Dominic Williams. I'm a performer and a poet myself, and I'd like to introduce this morning peers of yours in this group of writers who are interrogating the business of writing. Bernadette Horton is a political speaker and activist. She's well known among you, I imagine, as well, for her opinions on working class and the family home as something that's very important to society and political society as well. She's performed at fringe political events and main conferences, both as a speaker and as a poet. And John Butterworth has a career in music, playing live on stage as part of a band, also as a radio presenter. So both have experience of engaging with an audience, I suppose, that is different to that which they approached when they made a couple of short films at the end of last year. So I guess I'm going to open by asking both of you a kind of a two-part question, really. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about that previous experience that you've had of whether we call it performing or whether we call it engaging with an audience or entertaining an audience, and how the making of the film that you made last year was different to that when you considered a more literary performance or a performance related to your creative writing. So it is a kind of two-parter. So maybe you'll interrupt each other as you both attempt to answer that question, but I'll hand it to Bernadette first.
Okay. Well, I'm used to it was straightforward public speaking to start with within the Labour Party, and I was training to be a political candidate. So everything was set up for me. I'd arrive at places, and the PowerPoints were there, and the microphones were set up, and all I had to do was speak to audiences of a few thousand, which, you know, at the start it was a bit sort of intimidating, but after a while you just got used to it. But other than that, I created my own speeches, and they used to go through all the technical directors and everything just to be looked over. But I used to have free range of speaking on, I'd be given a topic and I'd speak on it, and it was all my own work. But again, it was just the fact that all the technical things were set up for me. Whereas when I came to do the Attic to Audience in my second year, last year at university, there was no technical directors available. It was all, I have to do this, I have to get it filmed, I have to present it, I have to do all the laptop stuff in the middle of a pandemic. There isn't anybody on hand to help. So I had to learn all the technical stuff during that short week block in order to do my performance, which I did, but I found that the most challenging. So
it's interesting that you mentioned all that tech setup, because it's something I've encountered as well during the pandemic period. We have a very simple PA setup that we use for our Poems and Pints events, and after 10 years you get used to very quickly setting it up. And in fact, the barman in the pub where we hold it would do it for me. So it was a bit like that. I just rock up and the stage would be set up and the mic would be ready. And then when we went into the pandemic and took everything online, and particularly when we started developing hybrid events, I found that it takes nearly 2 hours to set up the PA system, link the Zoom account into the PA system, take one speaker as an output into the computer and use the external microphone. And that was a very fast learning curve for me too. You, John, however, had a lot of experience of that previously anyway, as that famous quote that I keep making of yours, working both ends of the room, having worked on radio and as a live gigging musician, you I guess were quite familiar with the tech.
Yeah, I always involved myself with the technical side of things from a very early age. I mean, as a musician, I joined my first band when I was 14 and we started gigging. When I left school at 16, rather than going to a sort of standard sixth form college, I went to a sort of music technology college that was based at a recording studio in Manchester. And instead of doing A-levels, I learned to be a sound engineer and producer. And some might say that's because I'm an utter control freak, and you know, I don't like to hand things over. I want to, if I've written a song, if I'm going to perform it, then I have a specific picture in my mind of how I want it to sound, how I want it to be presented to the audience. So I've always wanted to be involved right the way through the process like that. And it actually stood me in good stead, because there are many areas, like for instance when I moved into radio, where you have to take responsibility for that side of things as well. Perhaps people have the sort of idea of the old days of the BBC, where the presenter really was just a presenter and would sit there with a microphone, and there were sound engineers, believe it or not, who wore white coats because they were very much engineers in the old days and they worked all the equipment. But when I was doing it, that's not how it was. As a presenter, you would sit in front of a mixer and you would have to run absolutely everything, including, obviously when you're on the BBC, this doesn't come into, but when I was in independent radio, timings were very important. Adverts had to be played in at particular points each hour. The news, which came from a central studio, obviously was broadcast at exactly 4 seconds past the hour to give each radio station that used it time to play their own news sting. And there were other things that you had to adhere to, a particular number of songs per hour, and of course a playlist. There were songs on rotation, and all these things, I mean, even those aspects of getting particular things in on time, you need an engineering perspective. It's an almost mathematical way of doing things. And I've always particularly liked this meeting of sort of art and science. It's one of the things I like about cooking is, you know, there are chemical reactions that go on, but food tastes great when it's put together by an artist. But you have to understand both sides of the thing. It's not enough, I don't think, just to purely be an artist and write or paint or create in some way. I think you have to know how it's presented. You certainly got so much more control over the end product. If it's presented in a certain way and you've handed over responsibility for that to somebody else and it goes wrong, then, you know, you kind of...
I think that really showed in your film that you produced for the assignment that we had to do in our second year, Jonathan, because it was so polished, it was so precise. I really loved it. It just looked like something that you would see on television.
Well, that's interesting, really, because I was going to lead in slightly a different direction, because during the film, John talks about being a musician and being on stage and being in total control of his piece, and therefore almost not engaging with the audience, but it being a very insular performance to himself. For those of you who've not yet seen the films, not yet been able to watch them, they are available on Moodle, and I will send links by email after this discussion, so you can watch them again. But in an email exchange that we had this morning, John, you spoke about there not being so much pressure on this kind of live performance, and I guess that comes from the radio experience. But you did go off script, if you like, in the film. You had written a piece, but then you performed it quite spontaneously. I think it did come across, as you say, Bernadette, in a very polished way. But there was a certain amount of spontaneity to that presentation. And I was wondering if, in answering the second part of my question, was that the difference between what you'd done before and in making that film?
Well, no, yes and no is the answer to that, as it so often is to these questions. for a large part of my career, I was very spontaneous. I never put a script together for any of my radio shows. There were certain things that I was told that I might have to mention, or of course, if there was somebody in for an interview, I would have had to prepare questions and stuff like that. But my live shows were always very spontaneous. But then as I got sort of to play bigger venues, and I was playing sort of 2,000-3,000 seat theatres as a performing musician, that all changed again, because the show became very complex. In order to be wholly entertaining in that environment, there were all sorts of things in the show that were run on computers. You know, there were pieces of video footage. Obviously, the lights were programmed, and nowadays as well, even the sound is programmed into the desk, and everything's run to a click track. And that meant that I then had to have a script for things that I was saying between the songs. And that was actually my first experience of having to rigidly stick to a script. And it was quite difficult for me. And I mean, there were times on radio as well where I was given a script, where I was, you have to say this. And it was terrible. I would fall over my words. Bernadette knows that when, you know, in classes in the past, when we've written something and then been asked to read it out, I'm terrible. I can't do it. I trip over my words. It's like I suddenly become momentarily dyslexic. I become nervous. My voice starts to waver, and it all goes horribly wrong. But if I can just kind of switch that conscious side of things off at that point when it comes to performance, if I can just let it flow, then so far it's always flowed okay. I'm sure the day will come where I'll completely dry, but it's not happened yet.
That kind of detachment from your own work is something that you have to learn for performance. That you write a piece that has emotion, that is meant to evoke feelings, and you need to perform it in a way that does evoke those emotions and feelings in the listener or the audience. But you have to detach yourself from those emotions yourself to enable you to focus upon making the best performance you can. So how did that how does that affect you, Bernadette? And relating to what John says, I think there's also something particularly difficult about reading your own creative work as opposed to other types of public performance, because there's an extra layer of vulnerability that can be exposed. So what kind of emotions did you go through when you were making your film, and how did the fact that you knew it was being recorded, albeit you were in control of that recording, how did that impact upon you?
I think it was quite nervous to have the knowing that it was being recorded, even though everything I had done previously was always recorded, and you know, sometimes it was on television in Wales, etc. And that never bothered me, but for this, it really, really bothered me, because obviously my peers could see it, and you know, afterwards as well, I put it out to a wider audience. I'll talk about that later. But the emotions I experienced doing it, because our block that we did for this was in May 2020, a couple of months into the pandemic, but with absolutely the most fantastic weather we've ever had in a spring yet. So my emotions were, I want to bring joyfulness, I want to bring happiness, I want to bring the sunshine that we've got outside into my performance to make my audience feel happy, because we're in a situation, and at the time everybody was thinking, oh, this will be over by July, or we'll all be back working definitely by September, and everybody was living outside, and I just wanted to bring that outside feeling into my work. So those were the emotions that overtook me. But I must admit, it was nerve-wracking, and knowing that you were being ultimately judged on it, because it was our assignment. So you know, you Dominic, were going to market. So, you know, that was the sort of things that I was, you know, thinking about when I was doing my work.
You've spoken also there about your motivation and a kind of what inspired you to make that particular piece, you know, what you were trying to achieve. What about you, John? Because yours was, it is a performance without a shadow of doubt. It kind of, it's represented as a kind of documentary sort of approach, but it was very well performed. You opened with that, that question about whether to accept or not a cup of tea. A very good example, a very mundane question. But not only do you consider, you know, all the options, but you stretch that out. So as a viewer, your consideration is starting to impact upon the patience of the viewer, and that's a deliberate cinematic effect, really, as well as the documentary. So what was your motivation? Why did you want to make this film particularly?
I had so many different motivations behind this that all came together. First, I mean, it was a great opportunity to make something like this. It was also, I'm quite an introspective person, and it was an opportunity to really take a look at myself as well, and at the same time present that in a way which is entertaining, which is something that I'm used to. So it was almost a kind of, I'm quite big on visualizations, and it was almost a kind of sort of implosion effect. To create the video, I had to go very deep into myself and analyze my own personality and my psyche. And in doing that, I kind of got to that stage of the singularity then, where everything explodes out. And that was the point where the entertainer side of me took over, and that side. And it was a very organic process. And I've also learned over the years that when I'm given a particular project, I mean, particularly as you presented this project, which was really broad, it was produce a video, and it could be kind of anything. And the worst thing I can do at those times is actually try and think of something to do. I have to kind of take a step back from it and clear my mind, and then something will happen and the idea will just come. It really does feel like it comes from somewhere else and like it's given to me. And like that initial seed is nothing to do with me. And then, particularly in the time that I've been at university and studied these things, I've learned that it's at that point then, yes, that is kind of, if you like, divine inspiration. But then it's up to me to take that seed and craft it and use the skills that I've learned to turn it into a good piece of entertainment. And so that initial thing of, I thought, you know, I am always analysing myself, always. I have to, because of the autism. I mean, all the time. I almost spend my life in an interview, because I'm always going, am I going to say the right thing now? Am I going to upset people? Where's this going to go? Is that the, you know, and it was good as well. It was a different environment for me. I was really lucky in that I made this video with my partner, who was on the same course at the time. She graduated last year. She's now doing her MA at ABBA, but she's a script writer and script editor, and I think I drove her mad because I kept going off script, because I wrote the script first and she went through and edited it and did this and said change this and change that. Didn't do any of the things because I barely stuck to the script, as you can tell, Dom, because I submitted the script to go along with it, and I admitted straight away that I went kind of off-piste. But yeah, the inspiration for doing it was that in giving us this project, in a way, you'd actually, for me, you'd given me a gift. Behind it all for me.
Sorry, John, I lost you just a little bit. I think my internet connection dropped a little bit. The last thing I heard was that I was giving you a Christmas present in in this film. The idea of collaborating, the idea of you working with a scriptwriter or a director, perhaps, was the role that your partner took in this.
She did direct it, really. Yeah.
It was because we had, during that module, we had 2 rounds of one-to-one tutorials, and we had a good chat. And there were 2 ideas actually, or this film that you made could have gone in a slightly different direction, because you originally considered a much more dramatic presentation. Same sort of subject matter, I think, but you spoke about how you might be curled up in the corner of a room doing one piece and then another part opening. I'm just interested personally why you went more documentary than dramatic.
First of all, there was to get that dramatic takes an immense amount of emotional input at both ends of the scale, and to prepare that and also run the whole technical side of things as well, I felt could be too intense, not only because of the time scale, but just kind of because I just felt that it was maybe too intense, both for me and possibly the audience, because I did want to go to each extreme. Because yes, there are times I always describe myself as an introvert, and I really do like to just sit in a corner quietly, as my granddad used to say, hear all, see all, and send out. And that's me. I'm an observer, and I use those observations then in my art. But sometimes I do feel overwhelmed by that, and I was almost afraid of facing that head on. I mean, that it could have been hugely dramatic, that side of things, but then the other side of it, where I'm sort of on stage and the extrovert, it does sometimes feel like a kind of schizophrenia. That's too far the other way then. So I felt it kind of needed to be compressed more and needed to be a little bit more academic and theoretical, rather than an obvious practice of showing really how I feel. I mean, that first idea that I had that we spoke about was really me going on film and completely bearing my soul. And I don't think I was really prepared to do that.
No, that sounds very, very sensible. It sounds like a great self-awareness and consideration of your own well-being, which, during lockdown was something we all had to be careful about, and the consideration of your audience as well. So having done this, Bernadette and John both, has this made you, having gone through that process, has this made you review the way that you write in any way? Do you look at your own creative writing differently now? Do you consider this performance at the back of your head somewhere? Has it made you think more about an audience engagement while you're creating pieces, Bernadette?
Yes, it definitely has for me. One of the things that I learned from you, particularly Dominic, in last May, was it's no use sitting there quietly reading a poem to yourself. The best way to do it, to see if it flows, to see what the rhythm's like, is to do it out loud with expression and to perform the actual poem. Now, when I was doing my work, which was a series of poems that I'd written about working class holidays from the 1970s right up to the present day, as in my collection of poetry, one of the things that got me was, first of all, I decided to do it down at the seashore because I live on the coast. So I took it all down there. My son recorded it, the tech thing again. I had to have somebody there. Came back and the atmospherics absolutely ruined it. You couldn't hear waves crashing. You had seagulls squawking, people walking past, people gawping in the background to see what was going on. You know, that was all very not right. And then came back to the house, decided to do it in the garden. It just didn't have the feel. So these are like the things that I learned. In the end, we did it in the house in my husband's music room. He's a musician. And, you know, I bought some buckets and spades off from Amazon and put them in the background as a backdrop. And luckily, we've got like a big sort of sunset over a sea up on the wall as well, which helps. And there were all these little attention to details that I never really thought about until it came to this performance. Now, I want to take that forward. I've taken it forward into my creative writing, that every time, especially with poetry, read it out loud and see how it flows, because I'm, as Jonathan has said on more than one occasion, I'm quite wordy, I'm quite verbose, I need to cut things down. It's one of my main sort of flaws, if you like. Reading it aloud stops you from going on and on and on. So that's the main thing that I've taken out of this, and I do it and now do it all the time. When I'm submitting pieces for other creative writing blocks at university.
Well, as I say, people who haven't yet seen the films can go watch them, and please do. This will all make a lot more sense. But let's take a moment now to share some of that performance live here. And it would be nice if perhaps both of you could read something for us today, poetry or an extract or whatever. Might you start first, John?
Yeah, okay. I'll read you a poem. I was looking through. Now I've got Word open now. I presume you can still see me. Or well, hear me is the most important thing, isn't it?
We can hear you.
Yeah, that's good. Can you see the poem?
No.
No? Good. And it's strange because as I was looking through, one of the other things that I suffer from is I go back and look through my work and I go, well, that's rubbish, that's no good. What was I thinking there? That's terrible. And so it was difficult for me to find something. But I'll read a poem out. It's not long, and it's one that again was that inspiration. The first couple of lines, or I think the first line, came to me as I woke up one morning, and I actually wrote it, the first draft of this poem, while I was still in bed. And I have a tendency to default to the style of rhyming couplets, and even I got sick of it. So I wrote the first rhyming couplet, and then I thought, right, for the rest of this poem, that's the only rhyme I'm going to allow myself, and I've got to make the whole poem work. So that's the sort of scheme that I used. And the story of the poem, or the imagery, is of a security guard, a nighttime security guard in a museum, doing his rounds, doing his patrols as he goes round and all the lights are off. So it goes like this. Paintings in darkness all look the same. Shadows inside an ornate wooden frame. Hints of a memory behind a smoked glass pane. The merest suggestion of a lover's whispered name. A shape and an outline. Your mind plays a game of conjuring meaning. No artist to blame. In half-light or torchlight or by naked flame, a detail emerges, an identity claim. A brief glimpse of truth, the artist's real aim, before greyness descends as the beam starts to wane, and the scene sinks back into slumber again, and paintings in darkness all look the same.
Right, thank you, John. Yeah, it's great, the rise and fall that comes with that poem, because of your use of rhyming couplets to create that. It's you get the sense of light and then darkness. You know, maybe even the steps of the guard, the torch moving up and down, and then of course you've got those glimpses of truth that you talk about and describe the light fading away. So thank you for reading this morning, and you didn't trip over any of the words. Okay, so Bernadette, would you like to perform something for us, please?
Okay. I'm going to perform something that one of the poems I did for the performance block last year, in the working class collection of holidays from times gone by. This is a modern one. I'm a bit of an observer of people. I'm terrible on holiday. I'm the one that sits there just watching everybody and watching them walk around. And this particular guy just popped up from anywhere, just quickly, and out came my book because he looked like a modern day Jesus. So this poem is called Jesus by the Pool. Jesus stopped by the pool scene today, modern Jesus. Not the white, blue-eyed Christian icon, gazing benevolently at us from alabaster statues in candlelit churches, but a real Jesus. Skin a shade of cedar, with dreadlocks long and woven, intertwined like musical clefs, making an ecclesiastical sound in an orchestra. His dive into the pool was almost without ripple. Clean, precise, not a spare centimetre of flesh across his lean body. He emerged smiling, lighting up the array of sardine sunbeds, locked together by obese brethren, frying like anemic sausages in the sun. I got up, tripped. He ran to help, a supportive hand reaching out across 2,000 years. I thanked him as he made sure I was okay. As he walked away from his good deed, I smiled and thought, more than anyone, Jesus deserves a holiday.
It's a Christmas poem almost, Bernadette. There we go, of Jesus taking his holiday. It's a poem that I think I pointed out among yours that really appealed to me. And I love the sound which you have when you read it out. I mean, the musical clefs, ecclesiastical, it's just something I could dance to, you know, that sound there. So yeah, thank you both for your performances. I wonder if there are any questions that would like to come from the floor, or any questions that either of you would like to ask each other. I'll just pause for a moment before I ask something else. If anybody would like to unmute themselves and just shout something at Bernadette or John, that would be welcome.
I'd like to, I think I might have missed it at the start, but I'd like to ask where I can see the films.
Okay, Richard, I'll as long as Bernadette and John both agree, I'll send you links to the films. Yeah, I'll send them to your email.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now that those things are complete, I was just wondering if you have taken what you did for those films anywhere else. Have you continued with it? Has it led you to think about doing anything that's related or moving forward in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things for me was I've thought several times about maybe starting a YouTube channel. My daughter has her own YouTube channel, as so many teenagers do these days. It was great for me because it really hit home how much work there is. Those creators on YouTube spend so much time and put so much work and effort into the things that they do. And it kind of hit home, and the idea is still there. But I'm also, you know, another side of me is having been self-employed all my life, I'm quite a businessman as well. So I need to be sure that I've got an audience before I start creating something. And so it's really, it was quite a major thing for me. Producing that film was a good opportunity to get a true idea of what it would be like to be a YouTube creator.
Cool. Bernadette, have you developed your piece in any way?
Yes. What I did was my Facebook page, personal page, as opposed to my timeline, was very much a political thing for me to pull up the speeches and everything else. I changed that and decided to change it for poetry. I do some of those very short Instagram sort of snippets of poetry that can just be put up, and that's a different format. And for this performance piece, I thought I'll put up the performance. I've got I do Twitter, so I've got quite a following on there. So I just advertised it on Twitter, put it up on my Facebook timeline and on the page to all my friends and people I knew, and said, for the pandemic, I'm putting this out. And I put it out, and I was more nervous than if I was speaking in front of thousands of people, thinking, how is this going to be received? Because this is different. This is feel good poetry. This isn't. I've been taught to do fire and brimstone speeches, raging against the machine, the government, and all the rest of it. This was let everybody feel happy and have a good feel to their lives, about nostalgic times that they might have gone on holiday with their families. So when this went out, I was really nervous as to the reception, but I got a really, really good reception, and that's inspired me to now put out things on that page on Facebook, and to advertise it around social media, so that you're getting responses and all the rest of it. The other thing you can do, which I think the investment is wise, is a bit of the paid sponsorship. You don't have to. You can just pay £10. You can pay 20, but you can target your audience. So 18 to 65 people who are interested in poetry, English, politics, and you can target it to Wales. You can target it further across the UK or even abroad. And I think that paid sponsorship, maybe. Don't go over the top with it. We're all students, we're all on a grant. But that could be, because that got me significantly more viewers and then people following that page. Artists like Brian Bilston do this. They're very good at doing the sponsored ads on Facebook, and therefore increasing their audience. Maybe he's got a bit more money than me, but still, that is a way of doing it, though.
Yeah, no, and the social media is very important. I don't tweet. I'm a Facebooker. Maybe it's a generational thing.
It is, we're old.
But I put a note up there. Those who've watched Rufus Mufasa and her film in the Working Writers series, Rufus is on Twitter, and Rufus has kindly offered that if anybody wants to engage with her after watching that film, she'll respond, and the importance of those networks is absolutely priceless. Well, thank you both for your contributions this morning. It's been a really interesting conversation. I hope it's been of value to everybody who's been watching, and it has been recorded, so it will be available later as well. Okay, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Dominic. Thanks, Jonathan, and everybody else who attended.